Want to make work suck less? Start asking weird questions. Like totally bizarre, off-the-wall stuff like, do you understand what I'm asking you? What does productive mean to you? What does it mean to be on time? What does success mean to you? What assumptions are we making? Nuts, right? It's so weird to ask these basic foundational questions about how we communicate with each other. The shared language we rely on to get things done. The stuff we all skip over because we think we should just get each other. Like, have you met other human beings? I've known some my entire life and still don't fully understand them. Fortunately, Laura Crandall has cracked the code. Today's guest on the DesuckifyWork podcast is a consultant and author who has spent years helping humans resist the urge to make assumptions and actually have those weird conversations with each other, which makes everything at work better. It reduces workplace friction. It saves time. It lowers frustration. It eliminates office politics. And it keeps us from creating dartboards with our coworkers' faces on them that we eventually rip to shreds because we are terrible at darts. Ultimately, having weird conversations gives us room to do the truly hard stuff at work we should be doing. Solving big problems, inventing amazing things, doing work that, as Laura would say, is fruitful. Fruitful. What a wonderful word. And what a wonderful conversation. Let's take a listen. Okay, Laura Crandall, welcome to the DesuckifyWork Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be part of the DesuckifyWork Podcast. That's great.
Well, I think it's a wonderful thing that you're here. I think you'll have a bunch of fun and interesting ways for us to take the suck out of work for some folks. I know you've got a book, I do. Some other stuff going on. So Before we dive too deep, I'll just give you a quick chance to introduce yourself, tell us what you do and how you came to be doing it.
Great, thanks. So I'm Laura Crandall, and the book that I wrote is called Working with Humans, Tools You Didn't Know You Needed for Conversations You Never Expected to Have. So my title is, I'm a management consultant in many ways, but my area of interest and my passion and my expertise is in the areas of workplace communication. So essentially, the foundation for whether or not anything goes well or poorly is how we talk about it, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I try to help people do, is just really get better at the foundational stuff that we all take for granted and that gets in everybody's way. So for giving people good communication tools.
That is amazing. It's very much needed. How did you find your way into that world?
I stumbled right into it with both feet and I don't know, several missteps. No, I have a management background. I started in my first real big job managing lots and lots of people, was in the hospitality industry in the resort spa world, back in the mid-90s. And from there, I got really lucky and I had a really great mentor who was a very good teacher and really empowered people to learn how the business worked. From, the bellman all the way to the C-suite. And it was just really well modeled. And I'm a person who likes to teach and likes to learn. And through that, I got involved in corporate ed and then decided to go and studied cognitive neuroscience and organizational behavior for my master's. And
cool.
This kind of kept going. I've been in business for myself for a little over 15 years. And just working with all sorts of industry, finance and academia and manufacturing and hospitality and nonprofits and broadcast journalism. And because there's humans to be worked with in all of those. So there we go.
Yeah. There's lots of communication going on in just about every corner of the world. So I think that's a great thing. I'm curious to get your perspective on, what is at the root of why work sucks sometimes?
How deep are all of the roots? From my perspective, I think it has a lot to do with assumptions and assumptions around expectation. And so from a communication perspective, just how we talk with one another. I'm on this podcast, I'm making a lot of assumptions about you. You're making assumptions about me.
Hmm.
Just the title alone, I have some assumptions about sort of your general disposition, what I
Hmm.
expect the conversation to be about, and kind of the shared background we might have.
Yeah.
And so we're bringing that into the conversation already, which is
Hmm.
great and fine. And it's, sort of the general gist.
Yeah.
But in the day-to-day workplace, especially when we've got intergenerational assumptions, we've got, technology assumptions, we've got educational assumptions, we've got
Mm.
contextual assumptions. We bring all that, but we never break it down to be able to say, okay, hang on, this is what I expect, or this is what I'm assuming. What are
Mm.
your assumptions? And we do ourselves a disservice. And I think we do it because we don't want to insult each other.
Mm.
And that unintentionally makes work suck.
Yeah.
Because then when we let each other down, because we haven't met our expectations, then we just get crabby and angry. And then we throw in more assumption. That person must be a total raging jackass. Like
Yes.
it does. Well, no, they just didn't know what you wanted, and they're coming
Yeah.
at it from a totally different place.
Mm.
I think because we don't slow down enough to just check
Yeah.
and be calm for a minute and go, hey, what would you like this to be like?
Mm.
I mean, it's not a common question. So how would you like this to go? What are your expectations of me? Would you like to know what
Yeah.
mine are of you? And being able to break that down, it's a really foundational skill that almost nobody gets taught.
It's a great point. I mean, I think we all sort of assume we have what we need in that area.
Of
Like,
course.
I've been talking for X number of years. I got it. I figured it
Exactly.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then that then makes what you're talking about sort of this introduction of a pause moment where we go, wait a second, are we really talking to each other the way we need to? Are we clear on the assumptions we're
Yeah.
making? And are we getting curious about what that person needs? Or are we confirming that they heard us, really
Yeah.
heard
And
us?
even exactly really hurt us, or that an expectation that we have or an assumption that we will be listened to.
Yeah. Mm.
And what's really interesting is that some of it it's so foundational, like the assumption around they should just be working harder.
Yeah.
Okay, what the hell does that mean?
Mm.
What does it mean to work hard?
Yeah.
And what does it mean to work hard if you're working on a brand for an organization,
Hmm.
or you are working hard helping somebody develop as a leader, or if you are pouring concrete, or
Mm.
working in a bank,
Yeah.
or building a jet, or like, what does that mean to you?
Yeah. God.
And the thing of it is that it seems like, well, gosh, I couldn't possibly unpack that with somebody. Yeah, you could. You could say, what does that mean to you?
Hmm.
In about 10 minutes, you're going to know. And then you can
Yeah.
go, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Let's hit
That's the
it.
beauty of it, right? That it's like,
Yeah,
I think you've used this phrase, like, it's weird. These are weird
super weird.
conversations,
Yeah,
but yet they're not ultimately crazy in the sense that, like, yeah, it'll
no,
take 10 minutes. You'll probably actually like be like, well, that was kind of nice
exactly.
afterwards. And then it may
Huh,
actually take the weird out of it for
yes.
you. Because I mean, as you talked about the work hard, there are the layers that would exist simply within your organization in all the different ways, from
Yep.
different positions, different levels, different backgrounds, all this stuff that can come into play, and that you could get 100 answers from 100-person company,
And you will get 100 answers from 100 different
yeah,
people.
yeah.
But that's not necessarily bad.
No, it doesn't seem bad, but I think the question would be like, how do you start to create some language that doesn't always require? How do you start to clarify certain terms sort of
Sure.
universally or globally within organizations or teams so that you sort of go, oh, okay, when we say work hard, we mean this.
Exactly. Well, that's it. You look at the things of let's look at some really foundational ones that really get assumed and that get technologically assumed and get generationally assumed.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about being on time.
Okay.
Right? So if you were a person who grew up punching a clock or knowing what that is, like, or you do it now, right? But there's a different, what does being on time mean if you have to travel to get someplace, if you have to get on a plane, if you have to get in a car, if you have to, versus I got to sit down and turn on Zoom.
Yeah.
What does that mean? And what does it mean to be prepared?
Yeah.
And also depending on your personality, I mean, I'm kind of a person who's generally in favor of the belly sliding stop. I'm here. Like, I tend to work with the time warp sort of situation. Like, it's fine. Fourth dimension, I'll bend it to my will. But, and I just sort of pray a lot for time management. But other people are always, 15 minutes early to something, or always 5 minutes late.
Yeah.
But unless you say, what does that mean to you? And it may not matter.
Yeah.
But if you know that I'm always going to be right when the buzzer rings, and that's just me.
Yeah.
And it's okay. Then if I need, like, hey, you know what, for this thing, can you just be 10 minutes early? Because that would help me feel better.
Yeah.
Of course I can.
Right. But I'll slide in exactly at 10 minutes before.
It's exactly 10 minutes. And people are like, yes, she's exactly here at 10 minutes. Right. But wouldn't that be nicer?
It sounds infinitely nicer to me. And yet I can even feel some of the resistance in me to be like, yeah, but like, what are they going to think of me when I get into this weird conversation of what do you mean by on time? Like, I'm suddenly fearing like, TJ's this guy who brings up a lot of weird stuff all the time, Yeah.
Oh, and for me, I mean, it's my job. So I walk in and say, hey, we're going to talk about some weird stuff. I'm going to give you an example. So what does it mean to be on time? And I kind of just I clumsily stagger into it. Yeah. But say, hey, listen, if we can talk about this, we can then have a frame of reference for talking about stuff that might be more difficult. Yeah. Because we've made it through some really basic stuff successfully. So let's practice on the stuff that's really seemingly unnecessary or that really is easier. So that we don't start with the stuff that's hard and we're unequipped. Yeah, right. Because that's like we get into crisis mode and then we're bumping and bouncing off of each other and getting frustrated and all this stuff, pulling our hair out, making those judgments that person must be some kind of raging whatever, as opposed to just a human who's confused. Exactly. Because mostly we're just humans who are confused. Right? Like, wait, what? I don't, wait, what? Oh, that's what you meant. Okay. Yeah. And so those things, like, start with, when we say things like, what do we want, whatever your drivers are, whatever your KPIs are, whatever is meaningful for the success of your organization or for you personally. What does success mean? Yeah. Because we all project into it, but we don't ever talk about it. And again, it doesn't have to be, we're not solving the riddles of the universe. We just want to see, oh, wow, okay. That's what that means to you? Huh. Okay. Yeah. I mean, like this, where could we kind of meet in the middle of, if that's appropriate, or if you're a boss and like, it's great that you have that different angle and that might be useful, but we're going to use this definition for this project or for this, the way we run our company. And I think that's one of the things too, is that, and it's an older model and an older set of assumptions and expectations that if you ask something, if you ask for input or you ask for definition, you then have to use it. It doesn't have to be decision by committee. Right. But at least you know that people might have a different perspective and maybe their perspective is helpful. And maybe it's something you really want to avoid. You're like, yeah, no, we're never doing that. But okay, but that's really helpful. I'm glad that I now know where you're coming from. And you move on. It's just, it's a way to make sure that people can feel heard, and you can understand different perspectives on purpose. Well, not in crisis. And like, the example of the success conversation, I'm thinking, I might decide as the person who raised my hand and goes, how are we defining success on this? I might actually end up going, you know what? I'm not sure that this is my home. If this is how we're going to
on an ongoing
Yes,
basis define success. And to me, it means something else. I may
that's
try
right.
to find a place. And now I have a better interview question when I go somewhere else. How do you guys define
Exactly.
success here?
You got it.
What are your measurements around that? What does that mean to you? So it feels like a useful skill that you can take anywhere and learn more about how you fit.
That's right. Well,
Yeah.
and think about what you just did when you described it. Wow, it lets you bring a level of discernment and a level of reflection because you were talking about you now. Like, how do I feel about this?
Mm-hmm.
You get to be more present in the moment rather
Mm-hmm.
than reactive or reactionary to something that's never been discussed,
Yeah.
that then people can be very defensive about. So
Mm-hmm.
when you actually have those, when you actually do know what you think about big ideas in our culture, like, and how you think and how you feel about things like success or engagement or productivity or whatever word du jour you want to
Yeah.
use, um, it's it's an opportunity to let yourself think calmly
Mm-hmm.
so that then you can go use that in a way that is present, that is considered, that is has some meat to it rather than being what you think you thought or what you're
Yeah.
supposed to think, whatever
Yeah.
that means.
Well,
Right.
yeah, there's like multiple layers there too, because it's like it helps me get clear on what I actually think, right?
Right.
I may not have really dug into it, but I have some
Right.
quick shorthand I grab when I hear the term
Right.
success. And then I make
Exactly.
judgments and assumptions based off of that. But then it allows me to potentially evolve my thinking.
Yeah.
Like, I have always thought of it this way, but now I'm hearing other definitions and
Right.
maybe I can, and then it also like, is that really my definition?
Right. Well, that's it. So this is a great one. Another one is professionalism. This is a fun one.
Mm,
And you do
that
like
one gets me.
it's a great sort of design thinking trick. You make somebody draw what professionalism looks like to them,
Okay.
right? Have them sketch note it.
Yeah.
And what I love is that I did this, oh gosh, it's probably 7, 8 years ago now with a software company that all the 20-year-old tech folks were and nobody in the firm dressed like this. Every single person drew somebody in a tie. Like,
Yeah.
what? Where is this? Like,
Yeah.
no one wears that. But it was such an interesting thing that was packed into their brain. And
Mm-hmm.
that, okay, so does that mean that no one here is a professional?
Yeah.
And it was so fun. It was such an interesting way through to, okay, well, do you know that since you're doing the job and you're representing the company and you're going, that actually is part of being professional? It was such a cool way
Yeah.
for them to see themselves differently and to also, what does our culture still hold on to as what professional looks like?
Yeah.
It was
Definitely what showed
so
up in my head.
fun.
Like the first thing that showed up in my head is I would draw a tie. And
Totally.
again, I
Briefcase.
haven't I
Yeah.
haven't been around people who wear ties most of my career. Worked in
No.
advertising. And I think maybe part of it, this is maybe my assumption on it, but I think for a lot of folks, particularly those who went into fields that didn't have the suit and tie,
Right.
you went into it because professionalism or professional, to be professional, has this negative imprint on it that is to be stuffy and to be like, we do it just this very precise way, as opposed to
very
I went into
prescriptive.
advertising to be creative, to wear t-shirts and to be just around people having fun. And
Yeah.
so when I hear professionalism, I actually bristle a little because I'm like, okay,
Sure.
somebody's about to judge me because I'm
Right.
not professional in the way I think of it. And
Totally.
I love how you can then bring it around and go, well, what does it really mean?
Right.
Can we change our assumptions? Can we change our definitions? And certainly that becomes really useful within a company culture to be like, what
Yes.
does it mean to be professional here? You're not wearing a tie here ever. So let's just
Ever.
get that out.
There will be nary a tie. Yeah.
And now let's create it. Let's build it. What does it mean? And then of course you get into, well, it means being on time. And then it's like, oh God, now we got to dive into that.
Yeah.
But that's the beauty of it, right? Is that you get
Yeah.
to explore all of the various definitions and assumptions you bring.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm curious in your experience. Like,
Yeah.
did you ever have a moment in your work experience that kind of brought you to this place where it was just like, I'm just surrounded by my own assumptions and others' assumptions, and you had kind of a moment? Or was it a gradual kind of over time noticing kind of thing?
Both.
Yeah.
So what I can say is that starting out in my early mid-20s with pretty high expectations around hospitality. So I worked at a 4-star, 4-diamond property.
Yeah.
And the expectations, everyone from a service perspective, from a hospitality lens, for consistency of delivery of service, you have to do things like define what is clean.
Yeah.
Like the minutia of that, but and that also personal responsibility that everybody pitches in, everybody, you got to think like just whatever you see on the carpet, if you walk past it, you're not doing, like, you got to pick it up, like pick up the schmutz, right? Like you got to do this. So, and the consistency of brand and the consistency of experience was very much baked into my behaviors. And I found it really helpful, despite my love of a belly sliding stop. But just because everybody was literally on the same page.
Yep.
And later, when I got into corporate ed and then across different types of organizations, what I realized, my aha moment was, oh, they have no idea what it is to have this kind of structure in their conversation.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, wow. And actually it was interesting because the extreme of where I noticed this was actually when I was working with an Ivy League school as a client. Very, very incredibly well-informed, brilliant people. The team of people I was working with probably there were 20 people, and there were probably 47 PhDs of like people there. And I kept going, just when we were trying to, some of the organizational things that we're struggling with as a team were assumptions about behaviors because they'd never discussed them. And one of the ahas was I made an assumption about using the word service, which was not acceptable. But I look at it as being of help, and they read it as being servant too. And it was so, I'm like, oh, we have such a different lens on that. And then there were some behavioral things that I was like, I would give anything for the people I used to work with in laundry 20 years before, because they would just get stuff done and go, oh yeah, I can do that because I know what the bedrock is that I'm standing on.
Yeah.
And it was such a good moment for me, many moments, series of moments to go, if the assumptions are too big and at too high a level of that, it's like if you don't learn how to add well, you won't learn how to multiply well. You won't learn how to, like, the foundational skills have to be really clear and really discussed. Otherwise, we hurt each other so easily at work, and that makes work suck.
Yeah.
And so it was really lovely to see that and have such appreciation for how I came up in the work world, but then to also give some grace to people who might just be operating neck up and have really big brains and really smart, but they don't, the day-to-day execution of things they might really struggle with because they're afraid to ask at this point because they do have 4 PhDs and they want to know, they don't know how to answer the phone, those kind of, it's a way to be generous and to say, oh, what if we clarified our terms and really got curious. And it can be, you can do it in 5 minutes. You can spend a day and get them all, like bang them all out. It doesn't matter. It doesn't take that much time.
Right.
You just have to be willing to take the risk to go, so how are you? It feels sort of very like a Princess Bride moment. Like, that word, I don't think it means what you think it means. I think it's that. And so for me, it was just really being aware of my own frame of reference and what a gift that was. And then not projecting it onto other people, but being curious myself. So modeling what I'm trying to do. Shocking.
No, I mean,
there's that.
It's interesting to hear how it kind of arose for you. And I just, I think back to my time working in advertising, and it's so much of this is, I mean, certainly the stuff around like timing and on time or meeting deadlines, like even what that means, like the definitions
what does that mean?
That we have around that, definitions around doing what the client wants. Like some people might be, well, that's literally like they sent me an email and we cut and paste that and we do that thing. And other people might be like, no, I read it, I interpret it, and then I go,
Yes.
what's really underneath that is this, and I'm going to problem solve it. And but then you show up and you have a meeting and one person goes, where's the thing? And you're like, well, that is the thing. And then you're just like, now you're both idiots.
And now everybody's an idiot and everybody's disappointed.
Yeah.
Everybody's upset. Everybody. And for me, part of why that clarity around expectation and assumption is so powerful is because if we can do that, that can one of the things I think that would help Desuckify work so much is that when you can eliminate or greatly reduce that likelihood of disappointing each other, we can reduce cynicism. And cynicism is the kiss of death to work cultures everywhere. It'll chew through a culture faster than anything. And it's so tricky and it's so sad because it's born of such deep, deep disappointment.
Yeah.
So if we can not let each other down from the get-go, and it's interesting, it's been popular lately to say, yeah, the best way to not have someone not meet your expectations is don't have any. Said sort of flippantly and too fast. And I'm like, I don't actually think that does us any good.
Yeah.
I think it's important to calibrate your expectations.
Yeah.
But also that means talking about them.
Right.
And being willing to go, can we talk about our expectations? Like, what do you expect from this? And I think that can feel like a hot button question. So you can say, so what are your hopes?
Yeah.
What are your hopes? What would you love to have happen? When you took this job or when you started this project or when you hired us, what were you hoping would happen? What was the delicious, yummy sense of joy you sort of had twinkling in the back of your brain?
Yeah. I like the distinction there because I think kind of in line with all this stuff, like the word expectations can be, first of all, it can be loaded for a lot of us, but also have very different meanings. But it does feel a little bit, I think about, this is a bit of an assumption. I'm going to jump into it though.
Sure.
But you talked a little bit about generational differences. And I think, somebody, I'm Gen X, like you'd hear expectations, you might bristle a little, but you'd kind of be like, well, that's a word I've been used to hearing, but I think Gen Z might be coming into the workplace and hear that word and go, what are you talking about? Like,
Yes, exactly.
Don't bring that like dagger into this place. Like talk about it through the lens of hope and what, like when you talk about like, what is that joyful thing that you're imagining at the end of this experience? Like, and it's not that either one of us is quote unquote right or wrong, but like, if we want to communicate and work well together, we better get clear on what we're saying. It's like I feel like you could write a 30 million page book about this because it's like, dive into every word.
That's why I had to illustrate mine. That's why I did a lot of, illustrations. There's a map of how the tools we need when we're working together and the journey that takes us. And the generational thing, it's been so interesting for me because I'm Gen X, can't get any more Gen X than I am. And I wear it proudly. But also it's so interesting when I work with any manager of any stripe, right? But especially somebody over the age of 45. And, let's just hang out with the Gen X piece. We were all called slackers. I didn't know a single slacker. We all had 3 jobs and we're going to school and we're doing all the stuff and like whatever. And having a good time too, right? So, but we also had to straddle industrial age and information age, right? So the work hard thing, we kind of got by osmosis. Yeah. Like working hard looks like this and you just work until you drop and you just get up and you do it again. Yeah. But we don't need to, I don't know. There's way too much history in this, but that's not necessarily the best way to do anything. It wasn't then, it's not now. And then it was definitely not necessary. But to Gen Z, it like, I love that word that you use. It's like a dagger. Like,
Mm-hmm.
no, let me just tell you what I mean by that.
Mm-hmm.
And I have so many clients who are managers who are essentially in their 50s somewhere, who get upset because people don't know what it is to be on time or work hard or
Right.
have an attitude. And especially people who are in their very early 20s who started school, finished school, whatever, in the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
isolated,
Yeah.
especially in white collar, largely digital environments.
Yeah.
Socialization didn't happen in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to be mad at them for not knowing what to do and expecting their your college classes to teach them how you want them to behave.
Mm.
Why would you do that? It's so mean.
Yeah.
Like, just have us sit down and say, so what do you think? Oh yeah, no, that's not going to happen, but I'll tell you what will, right? Like, oh no,
Right.
that's where it's okay to have an expectation and say, are you interested in this? This is
Yeah.
this is what it's going to be like.
Mm-hmm.
But what I do notice is that because people are so used to learning through osmosis and the culture,
Yeah.
that people get really defensive if you're not careful. Like in my work,
Mm-hmm.
if I said, so what do you expect of people? Well, I expect them to just figure it out. Well, good for you. How's that going? Right? So, and it's fine, but no, let's actually stop. Can we pause for a minute? Let's really see what you want from people. Let's just take a moment and really bring some open-minded discovery, some wonder.
Mm-hmm.
What do you really want them to do? Okay. Now that you know that, do they know that?
Mm.
I talk about like the psychic employee network. Like, it would be super handy, very creepy, but it doesn't exist, right?
I think
explain what you want.
Yeah, but is part of it I had to go through it, so you have to go through it thing? Like,
sure.
And even though I think some of that is a little bit of a lie, meaning like we give ourselves credit for figuring it all out, even though surely along the way there were people giving us some grace and opening the window to be like, maybe try it this way. We were getting feedback that was maybe helpful. Maybe it wasn't as like forward as what we're talking about, as direct as what we're talking about, where you kind of I'm going to tell you what I'm going to talk about, and then we'll talk about it. It was just more, it felt maybe more organic, but it was still like transfers of information that we could absorb.
Always
and we could
teaching,
ask questions,
always learning.
And yet we come away from it feeling like, I just scratched and crawled and nobody taught me nothing, And
I'm a better person than you are because of it, right? Like, it's so egoic, right? It's so, and I mean, at some point that's worthwhile. I mean, the fact that I worked in a salmon cannery for 16 hours a day, 7 days a week for a while, like, that's a badge of honor I like to wear. Like, not a lot of people do that.
Yeah.
Mostly just because it's a cool story. But I can sort salmon by species, little known fact.
Wow.
But the thing of it is that it's a badge of honor only if you make good use of it.
Yeah.
And what are you doing with that experience? Are you sharing? Are you contributing? Are you, and also, are you reflecting on it? When I, started working in my first official paid job with a W-2 in high school, I learned how to be a short order cook.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a lot of really good skills doing that by trial and error.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a good boss and great colleagues, but I totally goofed up a lot.
Yeah.
Would there have been a better way to learn some of the stuff I learned really inefficiently? Absolutely.
Right.
So now if I see somebody going, oh, wait, you're doing it the hardest way and probably dangerous, and you don't want to have to go and get stitches. Like, let me just pause, please. Right. Yeah. We can be kind and efficient and helpful and still let people figure things out on their own, but they don't necessarily have to get kicked around in the process. Right.
Well, it doesn't have to be like a science experiment where like, I know I could be helping them, but I'm choosing to sort of sit there, as opposed to going, here's a moment where like, I really don't want them to like get a 3rd-degree burn. So I'm going to tell them, don't do that thing.
Yeah.
But then of course they're going to have things that they're going to be figuring out on their own. I'm not going to be.
We're people. Yeah. It's fine.
Like,
and And learning stuff the hard way is sometimes the way to learn it,
Right.
but not when it's not the hard way, meaning experimentation, meaning trial and error, meaning, I just got to go figure this out because I don't get it. And I'm not
Yeah.
going to get it unless I go make meaning for myself.
Right.
That's great. And we should all be doing that anyway.
Yeah.
But from a communication standpoint, especially in environments where there is the constant data, the data deluge is so crippling cognitively.
Yeah.
If we can just help each other out by saying, oh no, when I say we need to deliver this to the client, let's actually know what the heck we're doing so we don't have to do any rework.
Right. Yeah.
Let's just make the stuff that we can make easy
Yeah.
because the job itself is hard and the world is hard. So the stuff that we can make easy, let's make it easy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really interesting way of looking at it, because as I hear that, then I think we can take the shortcuts we've figured out and help people understand what we mean by this, because the data deluge and all this other stuff, there's so much new stuff coming. We're always going to be having moments where we're just figuring it out, but it's a lot easier to head into that if I've got some shorthand and some other stuff that I can work with. And now I can put my attention towards the new stuff that's coming that none of us know how to figure out.
That's right. And that if there's a shared language of sorts about what we mean by some really foundational things and how we talk about stuff we don't understand, how we ask questions of each other, how we check for understanding, how we get commitment from each other, and everybody's kind of has a general shared sensibility about that stuff.
Yeah.
Those are the things that gum us up. It's not solving the giant problems. It's not the moonshots. That's the work.
Yeah.
That's not what, I mean, that's just, oh God, we have to figure out, and oh gosh, this is going to be a 7-month or 7-year project. That's fine. That's not where the frustration comes from.
Yeah.
It's the interpersonal stuff that we can actually do something about that can help lighten that load and make work, even if it's really hard, even if you're sliming fish or doing whatever, like if the shared experience of having some conversational connection and sensibility with your colleagues, that's what makes work suck less.
Yeah. I mean,
in my experience, that's
definitely makes
part
sense
of it
to me. I think certainly the world I come from, advertising, I always joke that it's the communications industry and we're just so bad at the interpersonal communication side of things. The other thing that is pretty rampant in that world, and you mentioned it earlier, I want to just come back to it, is cynicism. Like most industries right now, there's a lot of change, transition. AI is playing a big thing. There's a lot of like corporate mergers and things happening where people feel they're either literally displaced or they feel a little bit lost in this kind of massive system. And so there's a lot of people feeling like, somewhere on the cynicism, nihilism, like somewhere in there, they're just like, what's the point? Or it's all stupid anyway. Or like, and like a moment of that here or there, like I'm all for it. Like it's part of venting. But like when you sort of steep in it, to your point, it can be really damaging. But I'm imagining some folks listening are going like, but how? I think I'm seeing very clearly, and I think that that's the right response. How do you navigate that and help people at least see that maybe there's a different way here, and then start taking steps towards it?
Sure. So you bring up a couple of really, really important things, because it can be tempting to pound sunshine in the face of cynicism. It's not that bad and we're going to be okay and let's put on a show. Like sometimes that works, but it doesn't stick. Right. Everybody go do karaoke and you're going to feel better together. And like, yes, that's human connection.
Sure.
But what you just said is sometimes it's the right feeling, because one of the things that I think doesn't happen enough is that we don't just say, yeah, this part is bad or this is what's true. Seeing the world as it is, even if it's a snapshot of a moment. And speaking truth about that is important.
Right.
Because if people go, yeah, this part's horrible, and we're in a time of great transition, or this leader did something untenable, or we are, being taken over by, like, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Speak truth to that and acknowledge it as real. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
And then there's, there are things we can always do to feel like we can still engage. But that's why often what I find people don't have, and why I spend a lot of time about it in my book and work, especially with leaders and leadership teams and individuals. What are the qualities of character that you have internally as a group and individually that can see you through this time that feels like despair or that feels like incredible disappointment?
Yeah.
How are you wanting to be in the world? What are the qualities, the values about you that help you feel connected to yourself and to the work you're doing in a way that, even if it feels a little ridiculous or like we are paddling so hard upstream, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But that you know who you are and what matters to you and can talk about it. And I talk about it as having like a character compass, sort of a moral compass, but lighten it up a little bit.
Yeah.
I think that can get a little heavy. So what are the qualities that you really value in yourself, or value that you want to emulate, that can help you make choices when you're feeling despair or feeling cynical or feeling disappointed? And that kind of work also we don't teach leaders to do, really. Mostly like, we need a value statement. Okay. And then it's wallpaper and neat. But what does it mean? Like, when we say we have integrity as an organization, great, what does that mean?
Yeah.
When it says we provide great service, or we like, and I don't mean to sound glib, but it's often just a casual thing that because we're supposed to have it. But what if you had that for yourself?
Yeah.
That was the motto that you lived by, and people have them, people have them from lots of different places in their lives. They're the clubs they belong to, the religious institutions they're part of, their family, whatever. But we don't often really talk about it as being how we navigate our choices and how we can embark on things when they're difficult and when they're great. And, are you tenacious? Do you value community? Do you value compassion? Do you value, being deeply connected? Do you value curiosity? Do you value joy? Is like, what is it that is how you want to see yourself in the world? That anchor, even if it's very light and very like that thing that can keep you grounded to yourself. That's part of why I think people get so wound up in, and God knows I have, in despair and in cynicism, because we don't know how to be in anything other than that, right? It's become so myopic.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. A few things there. One, the sort of juxtaposition of the organizational values versus your own, character traits, your own personal values. And I feel like in the best scenarios, as leaders, you're not flippant about defining those values. You're not just picking the 5 that it's like, well, we're an ad agency, so we're going to pick creativity and curiosity and, attention to detail and fun and because that's what we're supposed to pick, as opposed to,
because
first of all,
that's what people think of us as.
Really picking what matters to you and really getting clear. And then what I start to imagine is, if you invite people to develop their own, or at least articulate their own, how does my set of values allow me to contribute to those set of values? Because you might be like, well, they're not the same. Oh no. But it's more like, no, your sense of joy is going to help us actually deliver on that attention to detail, because what others are going to see as drudgery, you're going to be like, let's make it fun and let's get to the finish line, but in a really joyful way. So those lines aren't drawn very often.
Well, and also we tend to think in the binary
Mm.
that either it's complete 100% or it's nothing.
Yeah.
Right. But it's really, and I really appreciate what you're saying is that it's the Venn diagram, right? Where is there overlap? What does, and I'm very visual. So I tend to think of like, let's say you have attention to detail and you've got joy. If those two things were in color and the overlap, what is that color, that third color that gets made?
Mm.
Right? How might you view they don't have to be separate. They
Right.
can be complements and you might get something really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then, if you think about it like light, how vibrant are they? How dark? Or if they're pigment, like what's the blend of how those things can work together?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be all or nothing. And it doesn't have to be, we're so locked into this absolute, it has to be a perfect fit or we can't do it at all. And we limit our experience of, wow, I wonder how could I make, the fact that I'm very, very deliberate, or I'm really conscientious, or I'm very, very, or exactitude is something that's really, really important to me, or complete, whatever it may be, that someone who really cares about courage.
Yeah.
Like, how would those go together? That's kind of fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
And nothing is ever, we each contain all of those things all the time.
Right. Yeah.
So, but if you thought about it, go, oh, okay. Might that be enough to lighten the load a little bit?
Yeah. I think simply the opening up of the conversation already takes the weight off, but then it feels like an invitation to co-create the culture a bit in that situation and go, okay, I'm bringing something into this culture, and now I get to figure out how it is, and I get to work with my boss or the team or whatever, and go, okay, here's how I think I can do it. And then when you start defining expectations around what somebody brings to the job, it's not just, here are the 5 things from the job description that I'm now porting over into your review form that we're going to use later. It's, I really heard you, I really see you, and now I get the best way for you to help us do the things is by bringing those values in this way. And suddenly it's a collaboration as opposed to just like, okay, go,
go. Exactly.
Figure it out, so to speak.
And also for you as an individual, let's say you don't have a boss. I'm imagining people are like, yeah, my boss would never do that for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's true. They might not, but do you have a pal at work?
Yeah.
Somebody, and a trusted colleague who you can talk about, like, I'm trying to bring more I'm trying to be kinder in how I think about these clients because whatever, or I'm trying to just be more, I'm trying to be more conscientious, or I'm trying to be more mindful, or whatever that may be. And I don't know how to do it. When you think about that word, how do you use that word? And then even if it's just you and somebody else, or even if it's just you, does that change your experience of how you are talking to yourself about your work? Yeah,
it's got to, right? On some level.
That's the thing, is that from the most sort of tactical perspective, that's how you build your brand. That's how you build your reputation, right?
Yeah.
You're known as being courageous. You're known as being thoughtful. You're known as being kind. You're known because if you do it on purpose, that's how that happens. You have a reputation no matter what, but is it the one you want?
Exactly.
And have you created it with intent?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that can be a whole other fun way to work.
Yeah, I like that because it's very empowering to know, like, I don't need to rely on like every piece of this organization being on board with this program, but more like I can start it myself. And then maybe that influences my friend who's like, he has a conversation and then they want to do it.
Yeah.
And maybe that's it. And that's enough, but maybe it trickles into other stuff. You never know.
Yeah. Cause that's just cool. Like what might happen.
Yeah.
Give it a shot.
It connects, what we're talking about connects to this idea that's very much in the culture of the last handful of years, around this idea of bringing your whole self to work, and what that means, because I think it's a fairly loaded term, at least based on how I see different people respond and react to it. So I'm curious, one, if you have kind of a definition of what it means to you, but above that, like, how do we connect around that so that we actually start to have some commonality with that language?
Right. I think it's been really interesting. I love the idea of it, and I love, like, in my most idealistic, pure form, erudite, brain in a jar, so like to noodle on this stuff.
Yeah.
I love it. But where the whole self thing really actually means most to me is when you get to be a whole person. You get to have a physical form that needs stuff, like whatever that is, your physical, like whether it's I got to go get my teeth cleaned, or, I need an ergonomic chair, or I have some sort of disability, or like you get to be a human person with a body.
Yeah.
And that gets to be respected.
Yeah.
In all of its forms and all that that means. You get to be a person with a psychology and emotions, and you get to be a person with thoughts and intuitions and ideas, and you get to be a person that has an animating sensibility, whatever you call that. One of the things that I like to ask people is, how's your spirit? How's your spirit?
Yeah.
And I don't mean it religiously. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
But people know it. They're like, oh yeah. Ooh, spirit's a little rough right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's part of being a whole person. And what's been interesting for me, when we get to be all of those things, and here's a loaded word, I'm going to swing back around to where I think this is interesting in the last few years. When we get to do that in a way that is mature, that you have cultivated and endeavored to develop those things in a mature, wise, learning way, that's when you get to really embody and be a whole person.
Yeah.
That's I think if we can walk around and know that that's what we're doing, that's what I essentially help leaders do.
Yeah.
Is help them be a whole people at work as they lead.
Yeah.
Because that's what we need when we say we want leadership. What we really want is mature adults. Like that's really what we want, who are like able to function well.
Yeah.
But that we all get to be whole. And I think it's so interesting because, during 2020, gosh, 5 years ago, coming right up, we got to see our whole lives on screens in ways we never did before, right?
Yeah.
You're like, I didn't know you had kids, like, because there they all are, like in your living room. Or I didn't know you had 17 cats, or whatever it was that we learned about people.
Yeah.
Now, and people are like, I just want to be able to be myself and not be judged for it, which I think is important.
Yeah.
What that I think got used and it's generational too. It gets you, I want to be myself at work. Well, what if you're a raging jerk?
Right.
That's not okay.
Yeah.
And one of the things that and why isn't it okay? Because it's hurtful potentially to other people.
Right.
And so do you know who yourself is?
Yeah.
Have you spent the time, and have you been afforded the time? I get that there is a certain luxury to self-discovery and also to the fortitude of will to be able to think clearly about, okay, what do I want to do and how do I want to walk around in the world? There's a lot to that. But I think if we could all be whole people calmly, but with ownership that we are responsible for ourselves, that makes that easier. And I think I get the fact that people don't want to be put in a box or have to wear a tie or whatever it is. Sometimes stupid rules are just stupid rules. Like if they're stupid, why are they there? Let's look at that. Let's talk about them.
Yeah.
Let's say, oh yeah, we don't need to wear ties. That's okay. But I think it's such an interesting thing to think about. Like, oh, what if people were actually not forced to be a certain way at work?
Yeah.
And what do we expect? What am I carrying around things about how we operate here? Which is
Yeah.
one of the things that I really talk about, is that there are key behaviors that we expect of each other, like in the social contract of things.
Yeah.
And there are 3 things that we want from each other, and one thing that we don't.
Okay.
And this is just how I look at it. I'm sure
Okay.
there's a million other ways to look at it, but this is what I find handy. Manners and kindness is the first one. And manners are just social rules of the road.
Yeah.
You know, let's all, like, please and thank you, hold the door, do stuff. Don't you just just the social cues of the world that if you don't know, you need to ask.
Right.
And we need to help each other learn. Be willing to be of help and of service. Like, oh, let me get that for you. Oh, what do you need? It seems like you're struggling. Can I be of help? If you can do it, right? Have pride in your work is the third one. Like, be willing, like, do you feel proud of what you've just done? And if not, why not?
Yeah.
And that's the teamwork, like collaboration. What are we giving to the client? Those are the 3 things I think we want from each other at work. The fourth one is don't be a jackass. And why I said, and a jackass to me is somebody who is rude, corrupt, hurtful, obnoxious. And we don't talk about that as a behavioral norm until it's too late. Until someone is exhibiting harmful or rude or obtuse behavior.
Yeah.
And then we say, you're being, I'm not, I was just servicing them. I'm a passionate person and I'm delivering for the client. Well, no, you're just horrible.
Yeah.
But if we don't set those things up, like, and by the way, these are the things we want. And this is the thing we really don't.
Yeah.
We don't talk about it early. And that's a way that people, they're bringing their whole selves to work. But what if part of you is a jackass? Like, and not that, like, here, let me just say this right. The jackass in me honors the jackass in you. Like, I get it. It's all of that.
We can all be the jackass. We all have
totally.
that. Yeah.
But do you own up if you are unintentionally?
Do you recognize it? Do you know how to navigate it, to pull back, to? Well,
and also for me, it's not a scold.
Right.
Don't be a jackass is usually said, like, you know, with venom and spitting text. I mean it like helpfully, like, don't forget your keys, and do you have your wallet? Like, don't be a jackass. Like, I felt like, oh, right. Got it. Okay, right. Okay, don't. Yeah. Because we all have that
thing
temptation.
that we all do. Yeah.
Don't do that. Just remember to default, like, maybe something should be in your inside voice.
Yeah. It's so interesting how all of those play together, right? Because I think the sort of manners and kindness is the other side of that. And so much of that to me feels like, how do we define that here?
Sure.
Right. What do manners and kindness mean here? Because it may be more rigid in some places, a little more loose and flexible in terms of how we define that. And kind of the same thing on the jackass. Like, what do we mean when we say that? Because I've seen places that are like, we have a no a-hole policy, whatever. And I'm like, absolutely. I love that policy. But then I'm like, I think that person's being an a-hole. Oh no, they are just passionate. Okay. Where are the lines? And they're not really drawn here. So then it becomes either a little bit of a weapon of like, I just don't like what you said, or it becomes permission to be like, no, I'm not that. I am, very enthusiastic, or I like to hold people accountable, or whatever it is.
Right. And I'm going to be a raging jerk and oppressive, domineering creep while I do it. And I think that's why, if you talk about it beforehand, I remember I was working with a company where one of their regional managers was just really passionate. I'm just passionate about what I do, and I hold people like. And I said, and I remember I was talking, like, do you realize that what you mean by passionate is really, really, really disruptive because you're being cruel? And it never even dawned on him. Yeah. And that's something and again, everybody's done it. I've done it. When I was managing teams in probably around 2000, I grew up in a family where volume when speaking was fine. it could sound like yelling, but there was, even if it was with anger, there was no jeopardy, like
Yeah.
zero jeopardy. And so it was normal for me. Like if I was passionate about it, it wasn't even a person. I was just reacting to something. If it came out loudly, I didn't think twice about it. But I was not aware enough then that, and of course, had you asked me, of course, I would have answered, like, of course, I know that people have different lives. I didn't get that yelling isn't just an accent for some people. It's, it can be really like, that's a huge indication of danger, which of course it can. I would have told you that, but I didn't check it for myself. And so that language, that accent isn't one that I use anymore in corporate environments. I mean, I didn't really use it. I was managing and whatever, but I didn't know. Yeah. And then when you know better, you do better. Yeah. But I think that's when you can define, what do we mean by don't be a jackass? And also like that summary, define it. That's usually what, and I mean, and I'm a person who has worked in HR. That's usually what HR is trying to control for. Yeah. Yeah. Like on many levels, right? It's the risk management stuff. Sure. But also, how are we not stepping on each other's toes? How are we helping each other up? Not, competing to, outfox and one up and that. And then if manners and kindness and pride in your work and being of service, if you're doing those three and doing them pretty well, chances are you're missing the jackass opportunities more often than. So, I mean, it's not a given, but yeah. So I think the behaviors, holding it over people about how kind you are. Yeah, that's delightful. The holier than thou is super duper awesome. So that's a lot of fun. No, there's so much good stuff in there. I mean, I think the thing you mentioned about yelling is really interesting because it's actually a dynamic that I noticed in my marriage. Like I am from a family where yelling really was only a thing that happened when something was going wrong. Got it. Yep. Like somebody was mad or something. It was very rarely like just part of our dynamic. My wife was not in that. My wife was like, there was a lot of volume adjustments and all that. And it's like, it's a source. Like, I'll be like, sure. Why are you coming at me? It's like, just talking, dude. Okay. And it's like, it's so visceral though. Yes, and so then it requires sort of an ongoing conversation around like, well, how do we work through that? How do we, that's right. Like, how do we show up into spaces with our whole selves, but also with tuned in awareness to how some of our individual quirks and mannerisms impact other people. And then how do we negotiate that? Because it's a challenge, Well, and I think that's where of course it's a challenge. One of the things that's so interesting is that if you can talk about it and say, okay, I'm willing, like, I want to talk about this, like, let's talk about volume. Yeah. And what's behind the volume. If you're willing to, when you negotiate, right, you are willing to be of help. Yeah. Right. That doesn't mean you have to completely acquiesce to never having your needs met or never doing things the way that you might want to do them. Right. But if you're willing to be of help, then you're willing to be helpful. Right. And that, okay, I don't want you to feel, I don't want to do anything unintentionally but can you help me too by knowing sometimes this is just how it is. Yeah. And I think we think that those kind of conversations can't happen at work. Yeah. Because they almost feel too intimate. Yeah. But what if you could? Do it with intent, without, well, this is the other thing about, I just want to be myself at work. That doesn't mean that work is therapy. It's not. Right. Yeah. You can have a really powerful, well-considered conversation where you listen and people are kind and you're receptive and they hear you and you get some needs met, but that doesn't mean that they are now the everything for you. And I think that's a lot of reasons why people don't do this at work, because they assume that then boundaries are going to be blown and everybody's going to just, and cry all over the conference room. And I'm a big fan of crying, by the way, just huge fan. Yeah. But it doesn't mean that now everybody's sharing it. It doesn't have to mean that at all. Yeah.
And I think
I'm a
it's,
big fan of privacy and boundaries.
yeah, I think people are afraid of what you're talking about. I
Yeah.
definitely hear people vocalize that or write it online. Um,
Yeah.
and I think even some people have this feeling like, I don't want even to be tempted to do that. Like,
Right.
I don't want to suddenly like, because that's scary. I'll suddenly I'm like unfolding myself out into the world and I'm exposed and
Yes.
all that. Like, so I think what I love is that you're creating frameworks for the conversations around this so that we can sort of together decide,
Yeah.
what does this really mean here? Like maybe some
Yeah.
places it's going to be a little closer to like where we share a little more because that's what we've decided works here.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe that's not for you. And then you go over here and it's like, I really like how they're living this idea of
That's
bringing the
right.
whole person to work. It suits me.
Right.
And we get
Yeah.
to
It
make
doesn't
those
have to
choices.
be only there's no crying in baseball or
Right.
like there's all crying in baseball. Like it doesn't
I
have to
know.
be that way. Right.
I know.
And you brought up the right word is that it's scary.
Yeah.
The interpersonal stuff, all the communication stuff is scary because it's unpredictable for all the
Hmm.
reasons we're just like, how are you going to react? What's the emotional load behind this? And how did like,
Yeah.
but that's happening whether you talk about it or not.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I like talking about it earlier because it makes everybody more engaged, or it has the potential to. It doesn't always, but
Yeah.
the likelihood that it helps people feel calmer. And when we talk about psychological safety,
Hmm.
now they have a tool to say, I'm not clear about this. What do you mean when you use this word? Or
Yeah.
I'm confused when you deliver this information this way. Help me understand your meaning.
Hmm.
Or I think I might be really confusing you and I don't want to do that. Like,
Yeah.
if you can do that, that can help take some of the surprise
Hmm.
out of things and infuse a little more predictability,
Yeah.
which is where, the cool thing about why I think we like sort of the productivity model of how our workplaces work is because we think it makes it predictable. Like
Yeah.
if we are on the conveyor belt
Hmm.
of time and
Inputs
we
and
just
outputs.
make the wood,
Yeah.
that makes it really, we think it's going to control
Hmm.
all the unpredictable stuff. And it does in many ways, right? Like
Sure.
there's some really cool stuff about making things within a margin of error that's just, it's
Hmm.
kind of cool. And I
Yeah.
can nerd out about,
Yeah.
TQM with the best of them, right? Like I can
Hmm.
do all that. But if we take out the humanity of the people who are making the stuff,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have to be surprising. You can without wanting to control it, you can just say, oh, okay, how do you behave when we get close to a deadline?
Yeah.
I noticed you start sweating a lot and you get a little short-tempered. Can I help you? Like, what do you
Yeah.
need? Like,
Yeah.
what would help that?
Mm.
Or do you just need to know that you just need to be left alone in your office while you
Right.
just sweat it
That's
out
the
for the next
thing.
48
And
hours? Great. We can
oh.
carry on. We'll
Yeah.
let you know when it's over, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's fine too. But if we can't sort of hold that lightly
Yeah.
and kindly, it makes everything way harder and more unpredictable, truthfully, because then people are
Yeah.
tense.
Yeah. We're just constantly reacting,
Yeah.
as opposed to, like you said, if you bring it early, like I picture like an onboarding experience where it's like, these are some of the conversations that we have here. We have weird conversations here, like letting me know that like you can ask somebody what they mean when they say X. And you should know that somebody might ask you the same.
Yeah.
And here's why. Here's why we do that. We like to have weird conversations because it makes things more predictable. It keeps us from having those surprises, especially when things go haywire and we're all kind of at our frayed edges already.
Mhm.
It seems to help and we like it. So
Yeah.
here you go.
Yeah.
That would be kind of nice and kind of a nice surprise. Like,
Yeah.
okay, they're actually like setting the table for me a little bit in a way where otherwise I just have to figure out, where do I sit? How do I fit in here? Where do they keep the knives? What do we do? Like, I don't know anything.
Exactly.
You
I know
know?
nothing. And now but I also am supposed to be professional. I'm supposed to
Yeah.
know what I'm doing. And it's horrible if you're new to the workplace. And it's even worse if if you have, 35 years of work history and you still don't feel like you know
I
what you're
don't
doing,
know.
right?
Any of this
Like you
works.
don't want to fess up then, right?
Yeah.
Oh my God. But that's right. I mean, if you can imagine what it would be like if you just knew that people were willing to be a little clumsy together,
Mm-hmm.
while you kind of sort out the stuff that we all assume we should know,
Yeah.
when everybody, and the thing of it is, people do generally have an idea,
Yeah.
but is it is it close enough
Yeah.
about enough things that they can actually complement each other if you talk about it?
Yeah.
Like, oh, wow, I never thought about success that way, or I never thought about, really what it means to really deliver for a client in this way. Like, I had never considered that. That's so cool. Like,
Yeah.
what might happen if we just take each other's perspective a little bit
Mm-hmm.
and know that that's okay?
Right.
That would be
Yeah.
kind of fun. That could help work suck a little less.
Mm. Yeah.
Like, just create a little space in that
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
with some really foundational questions about what we care about and how we want to communicate and how we want to behave toward each other.
Yeah.
But we don't, because those are so foundational.
We think we should know
We
them.
skip over them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we have to talk about it. And here's the thing that I say about that stuff. It's not rocket surgery.
Yeah.
It's just not, like, this stuff is not sexy.
Right.
There is nothing newfangled about any of this from my perspective, but that's why it works.
Right.
It's like, I think about it like, because I really love, I've studied many, many management models. I've used a bunch of them. You name it, I can nerd out about any of them. What I do with my clients and the stuff that I talk about, character, communication, key behaviors, it's like laundry booster. Like, don't stop what you're doing. It's not a management model.
Right.
Just keep doing what you're doing, but just add a scoop of these things and see how it eliminates the unappealing stains and odors of workplace miscommunication and poor behavior, right? Like, it really does help. Like, carry on, but just add a little bit of this and see how it helps. Because it does.
And like,
it's super boring, but super effective.
Try it to taste, figure out.
Exactly. Like season to taste. Exactly. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Add a little bit. See what happens.
So I want to ask you about one other thing. We've been kind of down the mature professional side of things, which mature is its own kind of loaded word. Just like
totally
professional.
loaded.
But one of the things I believe in, and I think you see this certainly from some younger folks too, but it's like people want to have a little more fun at work or invite play into work. And I think as an idea, I'm like, this is fantastic. And my best jobs were definitely ones where I had that, that piece of me definitely showed up fully. It was there.
Yeah.
But how do you do it in a way that's not cringe, to use the kind of current, like where it just feels like forced play. It's forced play
family
time.
fun. Yeah.
Yeah. How does that work?
So one of my many titles has been co-princess of fun. It was part of when I was executive at a resort, because we were having a morale problem, and so two of us just sort of started like, how can we help each other have fun?
Yeah,
and it worked. It was great. But that can be, and then another employer caught onto that, and then I was in charge of the fun committee. I'm like, oh dear Lord, no, make it stop. So. But because then it can be like, and we're going to have fun, damn it. And we're going to have, and you have to show up for the 5K run, and we're going to raise the money and do it or else. Like, I think, and by the way, there will absolutely be a trust fall and there will be a ropes course. And, which I like both of those things, but often they're cringe because they're put in hands of people that are overly anxious about them turning out okay.
Yeah. Mm.
Right. And they're really worried and they don't want to fail. And it's just people like, let's just lighten up. Let's go have a little fun. But again, with so much respect for HR, but the risk, like as soon as litigation about it, but if we go on a roast course, we all go out for drinks, like who's liable if anything goes, there's so much fear in our fun. So that's one thing. Yeah. But I think one of the biggest, and this will not sound fun, but but it's fun for me. So here we go. During 2020, I started really looking into the spirituality of play. And because the study of play, and many of your guests have talked about the importance of play, and from a neurocognitive perspective, from a physical, from the physical perspective, from team building, absolutely.
Yeah.
the most inspired thing that the way of thinking about play at work was this by an Episcopal theologian, Margaret Gunther, who died about 9 years ago. She was writing about the difference between work and play. And this is the coolest one for me for organizations. And she wrote this. She said, work is productive. Play is fruitful. And for me, that just like it just created this huge space in my body. Like, oh my God, what would it be like if every day that I went to work, I felt like it was fruitful? What would that feel like? It blew my mind.
Yeah.
Because especially as management, like when I do like official management consultancy things within organizations or, talking about numbers and stuff, productivity is a big deal. And I'm really good at helping people deliver on those numbers, but I am very, very allergic to the word because I think it's ultimately alienates us from our humanity.
Yeah.
But what if, and numbers are numbers, and I understand profit, yes, but what if the idea of fruitfulness factored into your work? Because it was like play is inherently creative, it's inherently experimental, and it takes time.
Yeah.
And you don't see the result right now. It takes cultivation, it takes patience, and there's a little bit of mystery about how exactly going to come out. Like think about cultivating fruit, right? Like you don't know how the grapes are going to turn out 1 year. That's why wine is amazing, or jam, or whatever it is whatever you are growing. And play is like that.
Yeah.
If there's a little bit of magic in there, there's a little bit of we don't know how it's going to go.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's so cool. Yes, it makes us a little nervous, but that's good, right? Keeps us on our toes a little.
Yeah.
And I think that element of play, and this was a question I would ask people who are listening, what would it be really if you felt like you had a really fruitful day? What would that look like? Not just a day that was productive.
Yeah.
What would it feel like if it were fruitful? And what does that mean to you?
Yeah.
And because there is this sense of delay, there is this sense of spaciousness, there is this sense of mystery, and like the reward can be so much more robust. I think that's interesting, and I think play there's a level of unpredictability that's just let's go on an adventure. There's a little adventure in it, and that seems fun to me. And I think that's really when I think we talk about fun sometimes or play, what we really want is joy.
Yeah, I can see that.
There's an element of that doesn't get like play, and play doesn't have to be joyful all the time, and it doesn't have to be quote unquote fun.
Yeah.
You can play it totally screwing up a recipe for something, and it's like, wow, none of that worked. Okay, know more about it than I did now. Don't need any of that. But what would it be if that was just like more experimental?
Yeah.
And I think that's where play again gets shoved into the binary of work or play or work hard and play hard, and if never mix the two. Like I had a boss that said, "Oh, yeah, seriously, I got to do that."
Yeah.
No, I don't want to.
Yeah. It's so interesting because as you describe this, I again think back to some of the moments where my playfulness was fully alive at work. And it really was more around the cultural norms within a company, meaning if somebody walked into we had this really fun office at this one place. It was originally like a big storage closet, and they ended up needing more space, and they put 3 desks in there. And it was like the playroom in many ways. We had a couch basketball thing set up. We played other games in there. And we still got our work done, by the way, and we probably got it done better and more creatively as a result of this. But a lot of that was dependent on the fact that if your boss walked in the room and saw you playing couch basketball, you didn't feel the need to hide the ball. Oh, I'm working now. It was just
I'm
more
in trouble. Yeah.
More like, how's it going, guys? What are we doing? How's they could come in and ask work stuff, but it was more like, I understand that you need this.
Right.
an awareness that this is
that human
fruitful.
beings need this.
Yeah. And I think the word fruitful is so helpful because it allows you to sit more comfortably with that cultural norm of like, of course, like eventually they're going to have to show me something. I'm going to look at it and I'm going to tell you whether it was good or not. But I kind of don't care about their recipe, and I want them to actually have as much freedom to experiment with their recipe. And that is play, and that is joy.
Right.
And that requires no trust falls. That doesn't require the 3:30. We're all going to get together in the conference room and do this thing. Again, once in a blue moon, that stuff might have its purpose,
fun.
But it's really about leaving room for it and allowing it to show up how it shows up, while you're also, keeping an eye on whatever the productivity measures are.
Well, and it's autonomy, it's independence, it's freedom, it's respect.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's being treated, and again, this is also a loaded word in our culture, but it's worth defining, as an autonomous, responsible adult.
Yeah.
No matter what age you are, that you are a person who is able to respond and take responsibility for your own actions, behavior, and what you've committed to.
Yeah.
And that's true whether or not you've got a kid who's mowing your lawn or, or cleaning the house, or you're the CEO responsible for billions of dollars. Like, are you going to show up and do what you say you're going to do? Yeah.
And that's like, I'm going back to the drawing of the being professional, right? It could be somebody sitting at their desk tossing a koosh ball, and then they've got their computer on maybe, and there's something cooking over there, and there's some scribbles on their desk, and it's more just like they're in cultivating phase, and they're nurturing, and they're gonna be fruitful.
Right. And that's part of how they get to be their whole selves at work. You get to be a whole person, because maybe you're a person, especially as we learn more and more about neurodivergence, you're a person who cannot think well sitting down.
Yeah.
You're a person who absolutely cannot move around. You're a person who has to just be locked in and focused and don't interrupt me.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is. Why don't we believe people when they tell us what they need?
Yeah, great question. I have a guess.
Why couldn't we just believe them?
I don't know what it is about human beings. Is working with humans is complex, but we have such a instinct to project our own needs onto the rest of the world and just make these assumptions that, well, this is what I need, so must be what people need.
And we don't want to be surprised by other people.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we don't want to be, and not surprised in the delighted way, but in the struggle.
But like, what is that? Like, what do I do with that? Yeah.
Right. But that's also why you talk about it. If you talk about it, like, oh yeah, that's just what this person does.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, she just stands on her head for 4 hours before she does. And then you
should see her work. It's fantastic.
It's amazing. And it's because she just keeps all the blood in her brain. Like, I don't know.
Whatever works. Yeah.
Hey, it seems to work, and we think she's a delight. Like, it's
exactly. And she's not a jackass. Yeah.
She's not a jackass, right? So these things, if we just knew that about each other, then we don't have to make stuff up.
Yeah.
We have to make up the story. We don't have to, be startled. I mean, we're always going to startle each other a little bit.
Yeah.
But if we can decrease that by talking about some really basic stuff.
Yeah.
And not making it harder than it needs to be. I mean, I'm a person who's still looking for unified theory about the human experience. So it's like, I would love to have that. But the foundational things of just how are we with ourselves? How are we when we connect, in communication? How do we behave with each other? Those things are foundational to everything, to how we work and how we play and how we can eliminate some of the unexpected stresses.
Yeah.
But if we aren't told that this is going to happen, of course it bums us out and makes work suck. I think, and we do each other a disservice by not being willing to go back to the foundations of, so what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I totally agree. And yet, before I ever met you or talked to you, I'd probably be like, that sounds weird.
It does sound weird.
It's amazing how our brains are designed to sort of see something so foundational as weird because we've just decided that we all skip that part.
Well, and it's too simple.
Yeah.
Well, water is H2O. I mean, like oxygen.
Right.
I mean, obviously, chemists out there, I get that there's more in it than that.
Yeah.
But the foundational molecule is really pretty simple. But without it, we die. Like it's simplicity of the things that we need from each other and we need from the world are elemental.
Yeah.
And because we love to have scope creep about everything, it's got to be more complex, And again, I love complexity. I've made a career out of it. And if you don't understand the core stuff, it makes it makes the complex more of a struggle, right?
Yeah.
Then you don't get to dwell in the complex because you're still trying to figure out,
right? You're
how do
tripping
I get
over
to say yes to this question that I need that like,
yeah.
That kind of stuff is not, that's where I really do like efficiency of some stuff that we can make efficient.
Yeah.
That even though it's not necessarily easy, we can make it a little lighter.
Yeah.
That's just more fun for me. Like, why would we make it harder if we don't have to?
It's a great headline.
It's human.
It's a great headline for life. Why would we make it harder if we don't have to?
We make it harder. Like, you can do it the easy way. It's way more fun.
Yeah. I want to give you a chance to flip the script a little bit here and ask a question of our audience, something I try to do once in a while.
Yeah.
You've answered a lot of questions wonderfully here. Do you have something we can throw out to the audience to get their perspective on this?
One of the questions that I would really like to know, I actually have two questions. The first one I've already asked, like, if your day were more fruitful, if you could if that were the driver rather than productivity or busyness, right? Your schedule, you're booked, I'm so busy. If you could end your day and feel, wow, that was really fruitful, what would that do for you?
Yeah.
What would that do for your whole self?
Yeah.
Or for your team or both?
Yeah, I like that.
And then I am really curious about because this kind of gets me in, especially generationally, this gets me into hot water. I'm really curious about the word adult and mature. Because the whole thing about, I have to go adulting.
Yeah.
Like I kind of get an eye twitch about that sometimes.
Yeah.
For any number of reasons. It might just be, my Gen X obstinance. I'm not quite sure, but I'm just really curious what people think if we had a shared understanding of what that meant, that wasn't punitive, that wasn't pejorative, that was more celebrated. What might that do for us?
Yeah.
So I'm just like, how would you use, the simple question, how would you use the word adult or the word mature in a way that felt empowered and interesting and helpful?
Yeah. And on some level, it invites, to me, I'm like, there's an opportunity sort of for a culture-wide conversation around that, right? Because I think some of the adulting stuff is simply pushback against some of the pressures people feel and some of the rules that feel stupid.
Totally. I totally get it. Like,
but
totally
like at some level, like, obviously the way humanity functions is there are adults, and adults have certain things that we do or expectations or roles we play. And maybe there is some room for, like, how do we want to define that now?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to look like it did 50 years ago, and yet we're still holding on.
It doesn't have to be a bummer.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, you got to, like, the electric bill is going to keep coming. Like, that's true. And that's also about speaking truth to what is, right? Like, this is, if you're 50 now, how many more decades the electric bill have you got coming down? Like, that's just a bummer, right?
Yep.
Like, that's just true.
Yeah.
Not everything is sunshine and roses, but if most things can be pretty delightful, that's more fun.
Yeah. And you can even change your perspective on the 30 plus more years of electric bills. Like, you're never going to make it something you love, but you might be like, when you see it and you see it as truth, you then go, okay, like, I don't know, maybe I'll find a way to, like, be more okay with it, or be like, hey, that's part of life. I take some pride in the fact that I take care of that bill every month,
Yeah.
That makes me feel like, I've got my stuff together.
Yeah, it's all right. It's cool. I'm super happy about it.
Yeah.
And also the other thing too is that we don't have to make it something we're excited about.
Yeah. Right.
Or something that we feel great about. Yep, there we go. That's how that one is.
Yep. So another question I like to ask, talking a lot about the world of work and the various ways it can be challenging and suck. If you could wave a magic wand and kind of fully desuckify the world of work, what does that world look like?
Speaking of seeing the world as it is, maybe that's not possible, but if I could, I think it would be more patient. I think we just have a little more grace.
Yeah.
And a little more sense of adventure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you can do that can you have a playful disposition or an interested in disposition to really wonder about each other, about what do we get to do today, right? That is youthful. That is inherently curious, because often we, like adults, mistake curiosity for inquisition. And right. But I think I think we could just slow down and lighten up. I think that's the thing.
It's another good headline.
Thank you.
If
we could do that a little bit, I think that would help. That would go a long way in desuckifying work, right? If everyone were just a little more, all right, let's carry on, shall we? Okay, let's go have an amazing time building whatever we'll build and feeling really great about it, and let's knock it out of the park.
Yeah.
But let's slow down and lighten up.
Yeah. And the slow down gives you the opportunity to ask some of these weird questions.
Yeah.
That ultimately actually probably make the rest of it go much smoother, faster, all of that.
It's amazing.
But we feel the weight of the ticking clock more than ever these days. And we think we can't even take the time to pause so that we can speed up. Right. I can't afford a little pause.
And also, and for that, how do you know? Just try it.
Yeah.
Just give it a shot. Spend 15 minutes thinking about this or talking about it with somebody and see what you learn and see how it can feed in. I think everyone would be shocked about how incredibly efficient it is and how much time you end up saving.
I know. Well, I love putting that out into the world. And speaking of putting out into the world, I'm now going to invite you to put a sound effect into the world. I know that you may know that this is what I do on my show. There's sound effects, cats, and other things. I don't have 17 cats like you mentioned. Well, we do have 3. And I love just giving people a chance to bring their own sound effect into the show. It'll find its way into the intro somewhere. So what's your desuckified sound effect?
I picked a different key the second time I did it, but whatever.
I love it. I got it. And as folks who listen to my show might know, the theme song for Desuckify Work is fully kazoo. So.
Oh, wait, I think I did hear kazoo. And then I wonder if I can do the flying saucer sound. Nope, it's not great.
Got it. Yeah,
it's not bad.
2 layers to it, the kind of undertone, deeper tone, and then the high tone.
Yeah, I'm a little out of practice with the flying saucer sound.
That's okay. I think it came through. That and the kazoo are both delightful, and in the spirit of embracing a little more fun in all that we do, I love that you came not only just with one, but multiple sound effects that we can, and I'll get them both in there. They'll show up.
That's fantastic. And also, I think it works at work or just in life. I think one of the best sound effects you can have is just somebody saying, "I'm so happy to see you. I'm so glad you were here." So,
and so rare that we say that. Like I don't know why we hold that so close, even though we feel it.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's part of being a whole person.
What
I can say is I'm so happy to see you, and I'm so glad that we were here together. This was so delightful.
Yes, I love that. Last question is just how can people track you down and follow all the good stuff you're doing online?
There are two easy ways. One is go to workingwithhumans.com.
Okay.
That will get you in touch with me and my book and the workbook and the audio, all things book.
Awesome.
Or just find me at lauracrandall.com.
And you're on LinkedIn also?
I am.
Awesome. Well, I'll throw all that in the show notes, and I just want to say this was an absolute delight. I am very happy that you're here, and you brought a lot of delightfully new ways of thinking about the world into this show, and I thank you for that. It was really fun.
It was an absolute pleasure, and I really appreciate your attentiveness and your excellent listening, and it was such a pleasure of a conversation. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Laura. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to the DesuckifyWork Podcast. And a huge thanks to Laura for opening the door to delightfully weird conversations. You can follow Laura on LinkedIn and check out her site at lauracrandall.com. Also, be sure to check out her book, Working with Humans, Tools You Didn't Know You Needed for Conversations You Never Expected to Have. So good. If you enjoyed the conversation and would like to dive deep into some of your own challenges at work, I invite you to schedule a free half-hour discovery session where we can explore new desuckified possibilities for your future. Bye, everyone.